I am Kelsey Rourke, a 31 years old woman. I co-ran a home renovation business with my sister in Charlotte, North Carolina, until the day I discovered she took $670,000 behind my back. What happened after that changed everything. The last time I truly saw Macy, not just in body, but in the eyes and the soul, was a quiet Sunday morning after a long week of renovation chaos. We were sitting on paint buckets in the skeleton of a half-gutted bungalow, drinking gas station coffee and planning the tile layout like we always did. She was making jokes about clients who wanted shiplap everything, and I was laughing, sweaty and exhausted but happy. For a second, I forgot about the missed invoices, the vague expenses, the unease. That moment, that flicker of us haunts me now. We built Rourke and Rourke homes from the ground up. Literally. We started with Craigslist flip jobs and grew it into a reputable renovation and design company serving the historic neighborhoods of Charlotte. I handled logistics, permitting, budgets, timelines, contracts. Macy handled aesthetics, floor plans, decor, finishes, the emotional pitch. She had this glow about her in meetings. Clients adored her. I was the spine, she was the face. We used to call ourselves the left and right brain of the operation. I guess I never saw it coming, that one half of us could turn cancerous. It started small, of course it did. The first red flag was a charge from a company I didn't recognize. A vendor supposedly hired for electrical consulting on a South End kitchen remodel. $18,000. When I searched our contractor logs, there was no sign of that firm. The contact number on the invoice went to a disconnected line. The company website was just a single page that hadn't been updated in years. Still, I gave Macy the benefit of the doubt. That's what you do when it's family, right? I called her that night. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I was looking at expenses for the Horton project. There's this charge for an outside contractor. Do you remember approving that? A pause. Oh, she said breezily, yeah, that was Jeff, I think, the electrician we subbed for a few hours after Wally bylaid. But we never use outside subs without signing off together. Relax, Kels, it was an emergency call, I took care of it. She was always like that, brushing things aside like dust on a mantle. And for a while, I let it slide. I figured I was being too rigid, maybe even jealous that she could navigate this business so loosely and still charm everyone around her. But then it wasn't just one invoice. There was a string of them. Luxury purchases tucked into our expense accounts. A private charter billed as a client acquisition meeting, jewelry flagged as uniform expenses, crypto transfers marked digital investment initiative. That one made me laugh bitterly at 2 a.m., sitting cross-legged on my hardwood floor, surrounded by bank statements and a bottle of Malbec I'd opened like it was a lifeline. My stomach dropped the moment I traced the wire pattern. Each transfer happened late at night, usually after we got back from a job or had a weekend off. She'd been siphoning money in slivers, enough to avoid flags, too small to look criminal on their own. But together, over $670,000 had vanished in less than a year. I couldn't pretend anymore. The betrayal sat in my throat like glass. I didn't confront her right away. Maybe that was cowardly. Maybe I was buying time, but I wanted to be sure legally, logistically, emotionally. I needed receipts. I needed facts. So I pulled records, bank logs, emails, texts, old contracts. I built a timeline, a digital skeleton of Macy's betrayal. And then I waited. 2 days later, she waltzed into our office 22 minutes late wearing a new leather jacket I'd never seen. She smelled like expensive perfume. Her hair was done, nails fresh. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion spread, not a construction site. The team had just wrapped up our weekly check-in. The crews were out, it was just us. I closed the office door gently behind her. We need to talk. She raised an eyebrow, sure about. I clicked on the computer, pulled up the flagged invoice. The consulting firm, the electrical ghost. I didn't say anything, just rotated the screen toward her. For the first time, I saw something crack in her face. A flicker of tension, then snap, the mask returned. You're going through the books behind my back now. No, Macy, I'm going through our business's books because $670,000 has gone missing. She scoffed, but it didn't land. That's ridiculous. I leaned forward, voice low. Stop, I have bank records, I have timestamps, I have every wire transfer. Do you want to keep pretending or do you want to start telling the truth? Silence stretched between us like a taut rope. I could hear the ceiling fan above us ticking, the hum of the fridge in the break room, the buzz of my pulse behind my ears. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her purse and walked out the door. Just like that. She didn't show up the next day or the one after. The shared drive we used for client files wiped, passwords changed, the business account emptied. I stood in our now quiet office, the exposed brick walls still bearing the stencil logo we'd painted together with trembling hands 4 years ago. I stared at the ghost of our name and felt something break loose inside me. Not just anger, not just betrayal. A kind of mourning. The next hours blurred. I called our bank manager, confirmed the withdrawals, called our accountant, sent documents to our lawyer, called Mom, couldn't speak when she answered. Everything I had spent years building, the sleepless nights, the hustling, the side jobs, the patched-together loans, the risk-taking, it had all been gutted. And not by strangers, not by recession, but by the one person I thought would never hurt me. Macy didn't just steal money. She stole my version of us. That night, I sat on the porch of my apartment holding an old photograph, one where we were both covered in paint, laughing in front of our first client flip. We were 25 and 27 then, broke, ambitious, untouchable. Now I was alone. But not finished. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started writing a new plan. Not a revenge strategy, not a criminal case prep. A blueprint for what would come next. She could run. She could lie. But I was going to build again. This time without her. And this time no cracks in the foundation. The morning after Macy vanished, both digitally and physically, I stood in the bank lobby holding a folder stuffed with transaction printouts and my own disbelief. The air inside was too cold, the floor too shiny. I felt like I was on another planet, like the fluorescent lights were peeling my reality back one layer at a time. John, our business account manager, was waiting behind his glass desk, his face already tight with worry. He'd known us since the early days. He even gave us a bottle of champagne when we broke our first 6-figure month. Now he looked at me like I was filing a death certificate. She withdrew how much? I asked quietly, though I already knew. He typed something, adjusted his glasses, then turned the screen gently toward me. A spreadsheet of withdrawals stared back, clean, clinical. $7,950, equipment leasing. $12,300, design development. $6,875, client reimbursement. $11,400, strategic vendor retainer. And on and on. This doesn't include the wire transfers to the Miami-based LLC, he said, or the account routing changes she put in place last week. I blinked. Routing changes. John sighed. Macy rerouted all incoming payments from current clients to a secondary holding account under Work Creative Holdings. It was just activated last month. She built a side pipeline while I was still sending out holiday cards to our shared clients. She didn't need my permission, I asked, my throat dry. You were both 50% signatories, he said softly. She didn't break protocol, just trust. I nodded slowly, each confirmation making the betrayal more real. She hadn't just taken money. She'd orchestrated a quiet exit plan, one invoice at a time, one fake retainer at a time. I left the bank with 2 things, a manila envelope full of proof and the nauseating understanding that our business was no longer ours. It was hers, gutted, raided, burned. By that evening, I was sitting across from Kevin Byers in his law office, the same place we signed our LLC paperwork 6 years ago, with hopeful eyes and matching notepads. Kevin hadn't aged a day, but something in his tone had shifted from warm and mentorly to crisp and tactical. I need you to listen carefully, he said after I'd laid out everything. What you're describing is fiduciary fraud and misappropriation, but more importantly, we need to contain the damage. I want to sue her, I said. It came out without hesitation. I want her out of the company, I want control back, and I want everything she took documented for the court. He nodded. We'll get there. First step, we file for a temporary restraining order, business-related. This will freeze her ability to move any more assets and suspend her access to company accounts. She won't be able to act in the name of the business until the matter is resolved. Hearing those words, restraining order, suspend access, until resolved, made my stomach churn. It wasn't anger I felt. It was loss, a loss so complete I couldn't tell where my business pain ended and my personal pain began. Kevin printed the documents while I sat frozen in the leather chair across from him, the office walls filled with framed degrees and quiet authority. He walked me through the rest: civil litigation strategy, options for recovery, precedent cases in North Carolina for sibling business disputes. I felt like I was watching my life from a distance, a life I no longer recognized. 2 days later, Macy was served. Kevin had warned me it would escalate things, that people, when cornered, lash out, but I didn't expect the level of venom in her response. Her attorney emailed Kevin less than 24 hours after receiving the TRO filing. The letter accused me of mismanaging company finances, creating a hostile work environment, and removing herself from the business for the safety of her pregnancy. Pregnancy. I reread the sentence 5 times, each pass making my chest tighter. I hadn't known she hadn't told me, no one had. It hit me like whiplash, not just the news but the way it was weaponized. She wasn't saying I'm pregnant and I need grace. She was saying I'm pregnant and that makes me the victim. Kevin leaned back, arms folded. She's trying to flip the narrative to paint you as the aggressor. I nodded numbly, and it might work. Not if we stay steady. I knew he was right. I knew we had the documentation, the transfers, the receipts, but optics don't care about facts. People side with the person who cries first, and now Macy had the bump, the story, the innocence. Even my mom started to waver. "She's pregnant, Kelsey," she said over the phone that night. "She says you locked her out of the accounts with no warning." "Mom, she stole nearly $700,000. There was a pause, a silence I hated. I'm not taking sides, I'm trying to understand. But there was nothing left to understand. Macy hadn't made a mistake, she made a plan. A cold, calculated one that involved cutting me out while keeping the clients, the reputation, and enough cash to start fresh, all under the veil of motherhood. I stopped answering friends' texts. Some were neutral, others were clearly leaning her way. I could hear it in their carefully worded check-ins. "Just hope you both find peace. I'm sure it's all a misunderstanding." One friend even had the audacity to ask, "Is there any chance you did push her too hard?" I felt myself withdrawing, one layer at a time, until the only people I trusted were Kevin and Rachel, the forensic accountant we hired. Rachel had no patience for drama. She was cold, brilliant, and exacting. She combed through years of data, flagging every transfer, every falsified invoice, every instance where Macy rerouted funds into shell accounts. "This is not small-scale fraud," she told me in her flat Boston accent. "She did this over time, intentionally. You've got a slam-dunk civil case." I asked her what she thought Macy's endgame had been. Rachel didn't hesitate. "She wanted you out, she wanted the brand, the name, the credibility, but without having to do the operations. She wanted to ride the ship you built alone." That hurt more than I thought it would. Because deep down, I still didn't believe Macy had started this with evil intent. I think she broke slowly. Greed doesn't arrive all at once, it creeps. And by the time you realize you're standing on someone else's grave, it's already too late. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I received a call from one of our biggest former clients, the Claibornes, whose luxury kitchen we'd finished last fall. They sounded confused. Said they'd been contacted by Macy, who was now freelancing under a new company, offering to renovate their vacation home in Asheville. She used our client list, our pitch deck, even our damn font. I forwarded the email to Kevin without saying a word. He called an hour later. "We're filing for intellectual property theft, Kelsey. She's violated every clause in your original partnership agreement." The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl who used to design our company business cards over pizza and wine was now stealing that same identity like a stranger. I sat on my apartment floor that night, the same floor where I'd once opened our first business permit, and felt a cold resolve spread through my chest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something she tried to rewrite. Not just a business, but my name, my work, my legacy. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Work renovation and design, solo relaunch strategy." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. Because if she could take $670,000 from me in silence, I could take my future back in full volume. The morning of our first court appearance, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I had tried to look put together, but the dark circles beneath my eyes told the truth. I'd aged fast, the kind of aging that doesn't show in lines but in energy, in posture, in the way your eyes stop searching rooms for comfort. I wore a black pantsuit that made me look firmer than I felt. My hair was tight in a low bun, my heels were modest, and my face didn't show a single crack. That was the goal: no cracks, not here, not today. Court wasn't about justice, not really. It was about presentation, proof, patience. The courthouse buzzed with fluorescent light and cold tile. It smelled like old coffee, copier toner, and nerves. Kevin met me at the main security checkpoint and gave me a nod that said, "Ready." I nodded back even though I was. Macy arrived late. I heard the click of her heels before I saw her. She walked into the courtroom like she was stepping into a spa, graceful, effortless. Her baby bump, just beginning to show, was tastefully outlined beneath a pale beige dress. She wore a cashmere cardigan and delicate gold jewelry. Not 1 inch of her said guilty. She didn't even glance at me. Her lawyer, someone I'd never met, introduced himself to the judge with the performative warmth of someone born to litigate family disputes. The judge looked older than I expected. His bench was elevated, his glasses rested low on his nose, and his tone was dry. He didn't want drama, just order. Kevin went first. He laid out everything: the co-ownership agreement, the timeline of missing funds, the rerouted payments, the fake invoices, the LLC Macy created to funnel money into a private holding account. The way she wiped our shared Google Drive, changed banking passwords, and removed me from every vendor relationship we'd spent years building. Then he delivered the knockout. "We're not only asking for a freeze on all business assets. We're seeking an emergency injunction to suspend the defendant's participation in the company until a forensic audit can determine the full extent of the financial misconduct." I looked at Macy during that moment. Her face didn't change. She just tapped a fingernail against her phone screen, completely unmoved. Her lawyer stood next. What he delivered wasn't defense, it was story. He told the court that Macy had been emotionally manipulated by me, that I'd created a toxic dynamic in the business, that she had expressed concern for years about my financial control but had remained silent for the sake of the partnership. He said that now, facing impending motherhood, she had finally chosen to protect her well-being. He actually used the phrase escape plan. As though siphoning $670,000 from your sister was the same as leaving a bad date early. I kept my face still, but my heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. When the judge asked if Macy intended to submit a written statement, her lawyer declined. "She's under considerable emotional and physical stress," he said, gesturing to her stomach. "We believe this is already bordering on harassment." Harassment. The word hung in the air like a poisoned dart. The judge took a long pause, then leaned forward. "I don't deal in family dynamics," he said. "I deal in facts, and the facts are these: over $500,000 left a joint account and landed in a private LLC created by the defendant. I'm granting the emergency injunction. The defendant is temporarily suspended from company access. All company funds are frozen pending the audit." A hush fell over the room. Even Macy's lawyer exhaled, not with relief but with calculation. This wasn't over, just delayed. After the hearing, I walked out into the hall. My hands were shaking. I expected Macy to follow. She didn't. But when I turned the corner, I saw her standing by the elevator with her lawyer. She looked tired, but her voice was clear. I caught the end of her sentence. "She's going to burn everything down just to feel righteous." I stopped walking. She saw me. For a moment her face registered something close to emotion, regret, sadness. Then it was gone. I approached slowly. You could have come to me, I said, before you made it this. She shrugged. You wouldn't have listened. I stepped closer. I would have listened to anything except silence and lies. Her lawyer stepped in like a bodyguard, but Macy didn't move. She just whispered I was drowning. You dragged me down with you. The elevator dinged. She stepped in, didn't look back. The doors closed between us. That night Mom called. She said you're trying to ruin her, she said without preamble. I was too tired to fight. Mom, she drained the company. She's been lying for over a year. I know, Mom whispered. I don't know who to believe anymore. That cracked something in me, not because it was unexpected, but because deep down I knew Macy had reached her first. She said I was erratic, didn't she? I asked. There was a silence. Yes. And that was the final betrayal. Not the money. Not the business. But the fact that Macy had poisoned the well. She didn't just want my half of the company, she wanted my credibility too. She wanted to be the victim and she wanted me erased. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for a long time. Eventually, I lit a candle and pulled out my laptop. Rachel had sent me an early draft of the forensic audit. I scrolled through it with clinical detachment, highlighting inconsistencies and writing margin notes like it was just another project bid. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it in all caps, Fraud Evidence Master File. Inside I created subfolders. Transfers. Fake IMVOICES. LLC documents. Client contacts. Voice RECORDNGS. I wasn't building a business anymore. I was building a case. And brick by brick, I was going to make sure Macy didn't get to rewrite the story of who I was. Not to the court. Not to our clients. And not to the baby she'd one day have to explain all this to. Because when you burn bridges with that much fire, eventually even your reflection stops recognizing you. The audit report landed in my inbox at exactly 3:14 p.m. on a Friday. I remember the number because I'd been counting minutes like heartbeats, waiting for something concrete, something heavier than my anger, something sharper than grief. The subject line was simple: Forensic Report Confidential Rourke and Rourke Homes. I stared at it for a full 60 seconds before I clicked. 74 pages. That's how much space it took to detail the collapse of my relationship with Macy. I scrolled slowly, each line peeling away another layer of denial I didn't even realize I'd still been clinging to. $672,833.41. That was the final total. Nearly $700,000 diverted methodically, secretly, and deliberately from our shared business accounts into a separate LLC Macy created behind my back. A company with a name that mocked everything we'd built together, MRL Studio Holdings, Macy Rourke Living, a brand she'd launched using our money and my reputation. Rachel, our forensic accountant, had done her job with the kind of cold precision that makes you both grateful and sick. She traced every transaction, cataloging the fake invoices, shell payments, client rerouting, and consulting fees that were nothing more than Macy paying herself through a backdoor pipeline. Page 28. A single $65,000 wire transfer labeled Client Materials routed to a luxury condo payment processor. Page 32. 3 airline charters to California labeled Brand Immersion Research. Page 47. A lump sum payment of $19,500 to a marketing agency that specialized in building personal brands for influencers. The same agency Macy had posted about on her Instagram months earlier, back when I thought she was just trying to understand marketing better. Rachel's conclusion, buried on page 68, was stark. Funds were systematically withdrawn and reclassified over an 11-month period. The defendant's financial behavior demonstrates premeditated misappropriation with intent to conceal. I sat very still, the laptop warm against my thighs, my mouth dry. This wasn't miscommunication. This was strategy. She hadn't panicked, she hadn't made one bad decision in a moment of pressure. She'd drawn a blueprint, poured the concrete, laid the steel beams of betrayal. And then she built her future out of my trust. Kevin called 10 minutes later. I just got Rachel's email, he said. You okay? No, I said. But I was calm. There's something eerily peaceful about hitting the rock bottom of disbelief. There's no more falling, no more hopping for a misunderstanding, just clarity. We're filing Monday, Kevin said. Civil damages, full control, IP rights, possibly criminal referral if the DA gets involved. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because there was nothing left to argue. That night I didn't drink. I didn't rage or cry or even pace. I printed the report, bound it in a cheap office store spine. And then I did the one thing I hadn't done in weeks. I walked through the main design floor of our office, alone, in silence. The place still smelled like sawdust and lemon oil. Our corkboard was filled with pinned paint swatches, floor samples, and half-finished mood boards from jobs I hadn't had time to grieve. I ran my hand across the drafting table. 6 months ago, Macy and I had stood right here picking out tile for a heritage townhouse in Plaza Midwood. She made some joke about my obsession with slate, and I'd laughed so hard I nearly dropped my latte. Now I looked at that same tile board and felt nothing. Jasmine's base. I went to the wall of framed photos, us with clients, smiling in front of newly renovated porches, beaming at ribbon cuttings and kitchen reveals. Macy was in all of them. Front and center. Her hand often on my shoulder. I took every photo down. Not out of vengeance, but because those weren't our memories anymore. Not after she rewrote the ending without asking. The next day, I woke up to something worse than an audit. A story. Macy had gone public. Not through the courts. Through Instagram. She posted a black and white photo of herself, profile angle, one hand resting protectively on her belly. The caption was long, poetic, and manipulative as hell. There are moments when the people you trust most turn their backs on you, when business becomes more important than blood, when your pregnancy becomes ammunition in a war you didn't start. I've been silent, but I won't be erased. She went on for 6 paragraphs, spinning a tale of emotional toxicity, betrayal, and corporate control. She never mentioned me by name, she didn't have to. The comments flooded in. You're so strong. We believe you. She's jealous, you're the real face of that company. She posted follow-up stories, soft piano music, out-of-context screenshots of our contracts, vague legal threats. And then a bombshell, a picture of the ultrasound. It was captioned, "Protecting this little one from everything toxic. Truth wins new beginnings." I felt physically ill. I didn't post a response. Kevin told me not to, Rachel told me not to. But that night, I got a message request from someone I didn't know. A young woman named Alicia. "Hi, I used to work with Macy. I think you should see something." She lied to me too. She sent screenshots. Messages from Macy asking her to design a pitch deck for a new company, one that would rebrand from the ashes of, emails to potential clients promising exclusive rights to our Charlotte team's premium vendor list. Macy even included Rourke and Rourke Homes' former budget template, the one I created. Alicia also sent a photo of a spreadsheet labeled Exit Strategy, dated 7 months before Macy cleaned out the accounts. And in that moment I realized she had been building her escape route long before we ever fought. She wasn't just burning bridges. She paved a road out of the fire while I was still pouring gasoline into our dreams. I thanked Alicia. She said I didn't want to be part of a lie, and I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I told her she just did. I forwarded the evidence to Kevin. He responded instantly. "This locks it, she planned it, you've got her." And yet, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. That's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. You don't walk away with fire in your chest. You walk away with dust in your lungs. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stood in my bedroom and looked around. At the vision boards, the sketches, the swatches, the plans I had once made with my sister. Then I grabbed a Sharpie and wrote something across the whiteboard above my desk. Rebuild alone better. Because she may have taken the past, but the future was still mine to design. Her name was Alicia Reyes. 25, freshly graduated from UNC and soft-spoken in a way that made her feel like she was apologizing even for existing. When she asked to meet in person, I said yes before I thought it through. Something about the urgency in her messages and the guilt between the lines told me this wasn't just someone trying to unburden her conscience. We met at a small cafe on the edge of Charlotte's historic district, neutral ground, quiet, no risk of mutual acquaintances. I got there early, sitting by the window where sunlight filtered through dusty panes, cutting across the floor in golden slabs. My coffee went cold before she arrived. Alicia walked in clutching her bag like it might be taken from her. She wore oversized glasses and an expression that looked one breath away from cracking open. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, barely above a whisper. I nodded, gesturing to the seat across from me. "I appreciate you reaching out." She sat, pulled out her phone, then paused. "Before I show you anything, I just want you to know I didn't know what she was doing, not at first." That wasn't what struck me. It was the word she. Alicia didn't say Macy. She had already stopped humanizing her. "I believe you," I said softly. She unlocked her phone and turned the screen toward me. At first it looked like a spreadsheet, basic rows, vendor costs, branding expenses. But as she scrolled, I saw the pattern. A line titled MRL Studio Holdings Discretionary Account. Alicia said she had me format this budget for investor pitches. Said it was for a new venture, a more streamlined, minimalist design firm. I thought it was her side hustle. I didn't know it was stolen. Then came the emails, a thread with a Miami-based consultant discussing fund transfers. "Let's run this through the Nevada account," one message read. "It won't trigger NC-based audits." A Nevada account. Macy had gone full stealth mode. Not just local misdirection, she was laundering the funds across state lines. She also said, "You'd be fine," Alicia said, her voice barely audible. "That you land on your feet like always." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, because I had no words for the ache in my chest, I simply asked, "Will you email these to me?" She nodded, "Already sent," along with a signed statement. Alicia didn't stay much longer. Before she left, she hesitated by the door. "She told me you were controlling, difficult." She made it sound like she was the one who'd been used. I let out a breath through my nose. She's good at that. She's really good at it. When I got back to my apartment, Kevin was already calling. "I just got the forwarded thread," he said, skipping hello. "This is it. This is everything. She's not just guilty of embezzlement, she built a financial operation. We're talking criminal fraud, tax evasion, wire fraud across state lines. This could land her in real legal jeopardy." I sank onto the couch, still holding my keys. What now? Now we file an amendment, we update the claim, add Alicia's affidavit, include the account logs, and we contact the DA. My voice came out slower than I intended. "Do you think they'll actually pursue criminal charges? If they don't, the civil judgment will be massive. But either way, we'll win." She's cornered, Kelsey. She can't keep hiding behind pregnancy and PR posts. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to anymore. After the call, I opened the files Alicia had sent and started combing through them again. Each one felt like a betrayal I already knew, confirmed in writing. And yet, every new confirmation still landed like a bruise. It wasn't the money that kept me awake that night. It was the intention. Macy had planned this. Maybe not from the very beginning, but close. Long enough to leave a second version of herself in the shadows, one that lied while the other smiled beside me during meetings, drink clinks, and contractor walkthroughs. The next morning, I got an alert. Macy had gone live on Instagram again. I didn't want to watch, but I did. She sat in a sunlit room, hair brushed into waves, light makeup, a soft gray sweater draped over her shoulders. She held her belly. The bump had grown, so had her performance. "I wasn't going to say anything," she began, "but when people take legal action to silence you, you have to speak." I turned the volume down and just read the closed captions. She talked about slander, emotional abuse, being shut out of her own dreams. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. She didn't even reference the money, just feelings. Words like betrayal, gaslighting, oppression, and liberation. In the comments, waves of support. You deserve peace. She was clearly jealous of your talent. Protect your baby, you're doing the right thing. I closed the app, closed my eyes, counted to 10. Then I called Kevin. I want to go public, I said. On social media, he asked. No, with the truth in court. I don't want a sealed settlement. I don't want quiet arbitration. I want everything on record. He was silent for a moment, then, good, that's the right move. Later that afternoon, I sat in the center of our now renamed office, Work Renovation and Design, surrounded by my team. We had 5 new project boards lined up. My junior designer was presenting mood concepts for a high-end master bathroom remodel. The crew was laughing about a pipe leak from earlier that day. And for the first time in months, I felt grounded. Macy had stolen from me. But she hadn't taken this. My team, my name, my values, my ability to lead. That same day, our inbox pinged with something unexpected. A formal notice from Macy's legal team. They were requesting private arbitration. They didn't want the trial going forward. They didn't want the truth, the Nevada account, the digital paper trail, Alicia's statement, presented in open court. Kevin sent me a screenshot. You want to take this? I stared at it for a while. It was tempting, quick resolution, no public drama, clean break. But it would also mean burying the truth. And after everything I'd been through, all the lies she told about me, all the clients she poached, the family she turned against me, I wasn't willing to stay quiet. No, I told Kevin, she doesn't get to silence me again. And in that moment I felt it. The shift. Not in her. In me. Because for the first time since this began, I wasn't just reacting. I was reclaiming. And when this trial came, I wouldn't be a victim. I'd be the architect of my own justice. The rain came hard on the morning of the trial, as if the city itself had decided to weep for what was about to unfold. Charlotte's courthouse stood gray and quiet against the stormy sky. My heels clicked against the marble floors with sharp intent, each step steady, measured, rehearsed. My black suit clung to me like armor, tailored shoulders, pressed lapels, clean lines hiding the tornado beneath my ribs. I wasn't nervous. I was something beyond that, sharper, colder, the kind of calm that comes after months of being consumed by fire, when all that's left of you is steel and silence. Kevin met me at the courthouse doors holding a slim black umbrella. He gave me a nod, not reassuring, not soft, but respectful. We didn't need pep talks. We needed results. This is just the beginning, he said. I know. Inside the courtroom, Macy was already seated. She wore cream again, of course she did. Cashmere fitted carefully around the curve of her now prominent bump. Her hair was straightened, curled just slightly at the ends, effortful but subtle. Her face was untouched by anxiety. If anything, she looked polished, controlled. I wondered how long she'd practiced that expression in the mirror. The courtroom wasn't full, a few local reporters in the back, some mutual acquaintances from the design world. One of our former contractors, a man we once called Uncle Dale, sat in the far left row with folded arms and unreadable eyes. Then the judge entered, and everything clicked into motion. Opening statements came fast. Kevin laid out our case like a scalpel: deliberate embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, intellectual property theft. The numbers were indisputable. The evidence was meticulous. Emails, invoices, bank transfers, testimony from Rachel, the Nevada account, Alicia's statement. Every crack in the foundation Macy had tried to hide now exposed beneath the courtroom lights. Then came Macy's attorney. And with him the fiction. He leaned on sympathy like it was the last thread holding her together, talked about the emotional burden of working in a controlling environment, claimed she was pushed out of the company, left with no financial options. He framed her pregnancy as a desperate turning point. She had to think about the child, he said. She needed to protect her future. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not because he was lying, but because he was using my sister's baby like a shield to deflect the truth. He never once said my name. He called me the co-founder, the plaintiff, the business partner. I guess it's easier to lie about someone when you pretend they're not real. Then came my turn on the stand. Kevin led me gently. We walked through the early years, our shared vision, our hustle, the name we chose together, the projects that put us on the map. Then the switch, when Macy began rerouting payments, issuing invoices to companies that didn't exist, traveling on business funds for ventures I'd never approved. I told them everything. Not with rage, not with bitterness. Just facts documented, clear. She didn't just steal money, I said, voice steady. She stole our story and then she wrote me out of it. Macy never looked up. Then came cross-examination. Her lawyer tried to paint me as cold, ambitious to the point of toxic. He brought up old emails, ones where I had pushed Macy on deadlines or questioned her costs. You seem intense, he said. Would you describe yourself as controlling? I met his eyes. I would describe myself as responsible. It's not controlling to want the books to balance. The jury member in the front row, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, nodded. Then he pulled the last card. She's pregnant, he said. Don't you feel this litigation is endangering her health? I didn't flinch. What endangered her health was fraud. What endangered this business was her silence. Pregnancy isn't a shield from accountability. Silence fell heavy after that. Macy never took the stand. Her team said it was doctor-advised stress avoidance. But I knew the truth, they didn't want her under oath. Because they knew, the second someone asked her the right question, she'd unravel. Closing arguments were brutal. Kevin stood like a monument at the front of the courtroom. He didn't speak with fire, he didn't shout, he let the evidence speak. This was not a misunderstanding, he said. It was not a conflict between sisters, it was theft, it was betrayal. It was a slow, premeditated unraveling of trust that left one woman holding all the broken pieces. Then her lawyer stood and gave the speech of a lifetime. He talked about redemption, about forgiveness, about how sometimes people make mistakes when they're scared, and how this child Macy was carrying shouldn't suffer because of one misstep. It was good. Manipulative, but good. And for a moment I felt afraid. What if the jury fell for it? What if the baby was enough? They deliberated overnight. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. I just sat in my living room staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades blur into circles, wondering if that's what life would feel like now, one long, spinning question mark. The next morning, I sat at the plaintiff's table with Kevin, heart pounding, mouth dry. The jury filed in, faces blank, posture tense. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Kelsey Rourke. My breath caught. We award her full ownership of Rourke and Rourke Homes, damages in the amount of $710,000, and all intellectual property rights associated with the brand. Macy didn't move. Her face didn't change. Her lawyer squeezed her arm, whispered something. Still nothing. She just sat there staring forward as if she hadn't heard a word. Outside, the sky had cleared, the sun had broken through. I walked out of that courthouse without looking back. Not at Macy. Not at the courtroom. Not even at the building we used to dream of renovating one day. That night, I stood in front of the new sign above our studio door, Rourke Renovation and Design, and felt something shift in my bones. Not joy. Not pride. Just peace. The kind that doesn't come from winning. The kind that comes from surviving. 3 weeks passed. The court transcripts were printed, the checks ordered, the signage changed. My name was on everything now, the trucks, the invoices, the office door. There was no more N. Rourke. No more shared anything, just me, the solo architect of what survived. And yet the quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was absence. It was waking up and not reaching for my phone to double-check whether Macy had responded to a client, or wondering if she'd show up on site dressed in clothes too nice for drywall. It was sitting in the studio we once shared, and not hearing her humming some Stevie Nicks song off-key while measuring curtain lengths. It was morning. You don't always cry at funerals, but you carry the weight of who you buried and everything afterward. Then came the letter. It was sitting on my desk on a Wednesday morning, cream envelope, my name in her familiar cursive. No return address, no stamps. Someone had dropped it off. Someone who had access to my space. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up. I stared at it for a full minute before sliding a letter opener beneath the flap and unfolding the page inside. It was handwritten, no embellishment, no dramatic closing, just her voice on paper, quiet and human again. I don't expect forgiveness, I just need you to know the truth. I knew what I was doing. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay it back, that I just needed time, space, freedom. But the truth is, I was angry. I felt like I didn't matter anymore, that the company was yours, that I was just decoration. And then I got pregnant, and I panicked, and I did more damage because I didn't know how to say help. You didn't deserve what I did, but I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was trying to build something that was mine. You don't have to respond. If it helps, hate me forever. But I loved what we built, and I still love you. Somewhere deep down, I always will. Macy. My vision blurred before I reached the end. I leaned back in my chair, holding the letter in both hands, the paper dampening under my fingers. I didn't cry hard, I didn't sob. Just tears, quiet and tired and long overdue. Not because the letter made things better. It didn't. But it made her human again. And I had missed the human version of her more than I wanted to admit. I didn't tell anyone I got it, not Kevin, not Rachel, not even Mom. I tucked it away in a drawer under a folder of vendor contracts, beside an old tape measure she'd once scribbled a reminder on in Sharpie. Don't forget to breathe. Life moved forward. We booked 3 new projects that month. My new design assistant, Claire, took to the role beautifully. She had a soft laugh and asked good questions. The crew seemed lighter now, no more walking on eggshells around tension they didn't understand. We were rebuilding, not just physically, but emotionally. Then on a cold December morning, I got a text. It was from Mom. She had the baby, a girl, 7 pounds 11 oz, they're both okay. No photo, no fanfare. Just that. I sat with it for a long time. My niece. A little girl born from chaos, from choices, from love and damage and legacy. I didn't know what to do with that. I wanted to send something, a card, a blanket, a soft noise machine shaped like a bunny, but I couldn't bring myself to go on Etsy without my hands shaking. So I did nothing. I just whispered into the air of my empty apartment, I hope she's safe. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. A baby girl wrapped in a soft pink blanket, her eyes wide and impossibly blue. There was no caption, no name. But I knew who it was. I stared at her for a long time. She looked nothing like Macy or me, just new, untouched, a blank slate full of potential. I didn't respond. But I saved the photo. A few nights later, I was having dinner at Mom's house. She served her usual winter chili and insisted on keeping the small Christmas tree lit in the corner, even though it was shedding needles like crazy. I think she's changed, Mom said softly, breaking a silence we weren't ready for. Macy. She's quieter now, not trying to be right all the time. I sipped my wine. She wrote to me, I said. Mom looked up. I didn't answer, but she said she was sorry. Mom nodded, her eyes a little glassy. She tells the baby about you, shows her the old office photos, says you built beautiful things together. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just said good. Before I left that night, I walked into Mom's guest room, the one Macy had stayed in during the trial. It was empty now, the crib already moved into Macy's new rental, but something on the dresser caught my eye. A small picture frame. Inside it, a photo of Macy and me in hard hats and paint-streaked jeans, grinning in front of our first renovated bungalow. I was holding a drill. She was flipping off the camera. We looked stupid and young and unstoppable. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The next day, I went to the bookstore. I bought a children's board book, What Do You Build with Love? It was about 2 raccoons restoring a treehouse, one beam at a time, learning to listen to each other again. I wrapped it in brown paper. Tied it with twine. No card. Just left it with Mom. She'll know it's from you, Mom said gently. That's enough, I replied. I never heard anything back. But a week later, Mom sent me a text. She cried, she said thank you. No name, no pictures, just acknowledgement. That was enough. Healing isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's just recognition. That we were something. That we meant something. that even broken things cast shadows. And that somewhere between the hurt and the silence, there's still space for something else to grow. By January, the freeze had lifted, not the legal one but the emotional one. The holidays had passed in a quiet blur. No Macy, no tension, no awkward family dinners, just candlelight, hot cocoa, and an unexpected sort of stillness. For the first time in over a year, I could breathe without checking my rearview mirror for betrayal. We just completed the company rebrand, work renovation and design. No ampersand, no echoes of what used to be. The new logo was sharp and clean with a copper gold accent I'd chosen myself, warm, hopeful, grounded. I stepped into the studio one morning and stood beneath that sign, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and lemon polish. Our walls were now lined with framed blueprints, metal sconce lights, and reclaimed wood panels we'd salvaged from our last big historic home project. It was no longer Macy's world, it was mine, fully, and it looked damn good. But healing isn't linear. Some mornings I still reached for my phone to forward her vendor updates or ask her opinion on light fixtures. I caught myself almost saying, "I'll check with Macy," during a client consult. The absence of her voice wasn't always painful, sometimes it was just muscle memory. My team noticed but never said a word. Claire, my new design assistant, picked up where Macy once stood, but she didn't try to be Macy. She was quieter, more methodical. She color-coded our samples and asked smart questions instead of bulldozing with charisma. It was what we needed. What I needed. We were halfway through renovating a split-level ranch in South Park when it happened. An email came through from a firm I hadn't expected to hear from, Everbranch Group, Charleston. Subject line: Partnership Interest, Savannah Project. My heart skipped. Everbranch wasn't just big, they were artisanal prestige big. Luxury, sustainable, boutique, and they were asking me, not us, to consult on a full historical restoration in Savannah. I opened the message. We are seeking collaboration with elite female-led design teams with a proven legacy in historic restorations. Our current consulting pool includes Macy Rourke, independent designer, and we believe your perspective would complement the vision. If open to a site walkthrough and discussion, please let us know. This is not a commitment, only an invitation. My chest constricted. Macy. I hadn't seen her since the trial. She'd gone quiet after the letter, no social media, no legal ripples, just vanished, but apparently not completely. She was designing again, freelancing, moving on. I stared at the screen for a long time. It didn't feel like sabotage, not this time, it felt like something else, a question, a door left ajar. I forwarded the email to Kevin with a single line. Do I respond to this? His reply came fast. Legally, you're clean, morally, that's your call. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet hum of my office. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season drifted past the windows. I thought about the girl we used to be, the ones who dreamed of making something beautiful together. Then I called her. She answered on the second ring. Hey. Her voice was calm, flat but not unfriendly. I could hear a baby cooing faintly in the background. I got the Everbranch invite, I said. Pause, I figured you would. I didn't ask them to send it if that's what you're wondering. I'm not wondering anything, I said. I just needed to hear your voice before I responded. She was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm not trying to push back in, Kells. I just said yes to the project. They asked who else they should look at. I said you, that's it. I couldn't read her tone. But I could feel something different in it. Less spin, more surrender. I'm not interested in rebuilding anything personal, I said, but I might be open to a walkthrough. That's all I was hoping for, she said. I told her I'd see her next Thursday in Savannah. We met at the site, a row of weathered 1800s townhouses wrapped in scaffolding and ivy. The wood creaked beneath our boots. The air smelled like damp history and cracked plaster. I ran my fingers along a worn banister that had probably outlived everyone who first walked these halls. She stepped in through the side doorway, jeans, boots, hair in a braid, no makeup, no cardigan, no armor. Just Macy. She smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. Original crown molding, she said, running her fingers over a dental pattern above the parlor. Hand cut. You always notice the trim first, I said. We didn't talk about the past. Not directly. We walked each floor, commenting on structural integrity, whether to open the floor plan, what could be preserved versus replaced. We debated wallpaper, lighting, load-bearing beams. It was strangely easy, familiar. Like two ghosts returning to a place we once haunted together. Afterward, we stood on the porch in silence. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. This isn't legal or dramatic, it's just for you. I nodded and slipped it into my coat. No thank you, no goodbye. We turned, walked down opposite ends of the sidewalk, and left it there. Back at my hotel, I opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note. Today felt like something good, even if it was just for today. You reminded me of who I was before I ruined everything. Thank you for not spitting in my face. I hope the baby grows up to be like you. I folded it gently and placed it in the same folder as her first letter. Not because I was collecting her apologies, but because they were part of the blueprint now. Part of the layers beneath the life I was rebuilding. I declined the Everbranch project. Not out of pettiness, not even to avoid her. But because it didn't feel like mine. Instead, I took on a full renovation of a historic library in Durham, a project with roots, with legacy, with meaning. 1 week into the remodel, I stood alone in the reading room, surrounded by empty shelves and filtered sunlight, and whispered something I didn't expect. I forgive you. Not out loud, not to her. To myself. Because forgiveness isn't a gift you give the person who hurt you. It's the scaffolding you build so you can move again. April was soft and slow. Dogwoods bloomed in white explosions along the sidewalks. The air in Charlotte turned warm and syrupy, and the harshness of the past winter of the courtrooms and silence and slow rebuilding began to thaw. I was in the middle of reviewing backsplash options for a Craftsman home redo when Megan, my office manager, peeked into the meeting room holding her tablet like it was made of glass. "Kels," she said carefully, "I think you should see this." She handed it to me without further explanation. Subject line: Investment Opportunity, Confidential Inquiry. From Everbranch Group, Charleston. My eyes jumped immediately to the name listed beneath the sender. Macy Rourke, Design Consultant, Independent. My stomach turned, I sat back in my chair. The email wasn't dramatic, it was professional, crisp. We are preparing to break ground on a legacy property in Savannah's historic district. Due to the scale and cultural sensitivity of the restoration, we are inviting a short list of independent design leaders to collaborate. We are aware of your contributions to historic preservation and believe your participation could add value and resonance to the project. We are also in conversation with Ms. Macy Rourke. There is no expectation of joint collaboration unless both parties consent. I reread the lines 3 times. They were being careful, but they were also opening a door. Macy hadn't been quiet after all. She'd been building again, slowly, smartly, under a new name. No lawsuits, no social media declarations, just quiet work. I forwarded the email to Kevin with a short message. "Do I touch this?" His reply came fast. "Legally, totally safe. Emotionally, that's between you and your gut." That afternoon, I sat at my desk staring out the window. Outside, Claire was sketching porch trim samples beside our contractor, sunlight catching on the edge of her iPad. I thought about that email, about the baby, about Macy's letter, about the note from Savannah. And I picked up my phone. I didn't text. I called. She answered immediately. "Hey." Her voice was smaller than I remembered. I didn't waste time. "I got the email." "I figured," she said. "They reached out to me first. I didn't suggest you, but I didn't stop them either." Her voice was cautious, but not cold. "They asked me who could match the scope. I said your name, that's all." I paused. I didn't know how to hold what I felt. It wasn't anger or hope. It was something grayer, like the color of dust after a demolition. "You really think we could work together again?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think we were good at it. I think for one house maybe we could remember that part." Silence passed between us. Then I said, "One walkthrough, no promises, we meet, we see the space, we keep it professional." "Okay," she whispered. That night I told Mom I wasn't sure why. She didn't blink. You're stronger now, that's the difference. I didn't disagree. Thursday morning, Savannah greeted me with sunshine and the scent of wisteria. I arrived early and took a slow walk through the 3 joined row homes that made up the project site. Original gas lanterns, Horsetail banisters, floorboards bowed with age and story. It was the kind of job that reminded me why I fell in love with restoration. You don't just fix what's broken, you listen to it. You let the house tell you what it remembers. Macy arrived 20 minutes later. She wore jeans, sneakers, a navy button-down. Her hair was tied back and she carried a leather notebook, the same kind we used to use when we sketched in parks and coffee shops planning our first flip. She nodded at me from the threshold. Beautiful space, she said. Needs a lot of love, I replied. For the next 90 minutes, we were designers. Not sisters, not rivals. Just 2 women walking through memory and structure and possibility. We noted the weak points in the foundation, the decaying window casements, the bad plumbing. She pointed out the stained glass medallions I'd missed on the upper transoms. I flagged a late period addition in the rear of the second home that was throwing off the symmetry. We disagreed gently about how to handle the flooring. Her suggestion leaned modern, mine traditional. But we didn't fight. We worked. And when it was over, we stood on the sidewalk, sun high above us, both quiet. I'm not asking for a partnership, she said. I wouldn't say yes, I replied. She nodded. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to be on the same page, even if it's the last time. She pulled an envelope from her bag and handed it to me. This isn't about the project, it's not even an apology. I accepted it without looking at it. Then I asked something I didn't expect to. What's her name? She blinked. The baby. I nodded. Sadie. It hit me like a soft punch. Simple, timeless. A name we used to toss around when we joked about starting families after success. I remember writing it once in the margin of a tile spec sheet. Macy had said, if we ever both have daughters, maybe they'll work together someday. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Tell her I said hi. She nodded and walked away. Back in Charlotte, I opened the letter. It read, this wasn't about forgiveness, it wasn't about redemption, I don't expect either. But this was the first time I felt proud again, not for who I was, but for what I used to believe I could be. Thank you for letting me borrow that feeling. I sat at my desk for a long time afterward. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I just opened a new folder on my desktop, titled Legacy Unfinished Projects. Because whether or not I ever worked with her again didn't matter. What mattered was that I could. That I was capable of holding memory and boundaries in the same palm. Of choosing the project, not the pain. Of walking into something shared and still walking out whole. The baby came to visit before the summer heat did. Not with Macy. Not with ceremony. Just with Mom, a surprise drop-in, a half apology in the form of lemon cookies, and a baby girl wrapped in a sunflower yellow onesie, asleep in a carrier against her grandmother's chest. She's good with noise, Mom said, gently rocking side to side as Claire's playlist hummed through the studio speakers. I looked at the tiny thing, her head bobbing slightly as Mom moved, her lips puckered in a dream. My niece. Sadie. A name I once scribbled on a napkin in a coffee shop, joking about nursery colors and custom alphabet art. A name that somehow passed through wreckage and landed here, breathing, sleeping, real. She looks like Macy, I said. Mom smiled. She has your eyes. I wasn't sure if that was true, or if it was just something mothers said to make fractured things feel stitched. Either way, I didn't argue. Claire came in with 2 swatches in hand, paused mid-step when she saw Sadie. Her face softened. New project, she teased. Legacy client, I said dryly, and Claire laughed. We chose the ochre velvet for the dining nook bench. After Mom left, Sadie still sleeping, a pacifier rising and falling with her tiny chest, I sat down at my desk and stared at the blueprints for our next big project, an artist loft conversion in Plaza Midwood. Exposed beams, brick walls, high ceilings, low light. But my eyes kept drifting to the open journal beside the plan set, the one I hadn't touched in weeks. I flipped to the back. There in Macy's handwriting, dated 3 years ago. Legacy isn't what you leave when you're gone, it's what you're brave enough to build while you're still here. She'd written that the night we pitched our firm to the City Redevelopment Committee, back when we were sisters and business partners and too hungry to know better. That quote sat with me longer than I expected. Because legacy, real legacy, isn't about what they remember you for. It's about what you choose to carry forward. What you refuse to let die, even when the people around you break everything sacred. I thought about the house in Savannah, the broken trim we argued about, the way we somehow found rhythm again in a place neither of us owned. I thought about Sadie's letter, Macy's apology, the second letter, the envelope that smelled like sawdust and regret. And I knew. It wasn't about rebuilding the partnership. It was about finishing what was mine. I created a new file. Titled it Legacy Projects Kelsey Rourke. Inside, I dropped our most challenging blueprints, homes where the floorboards buckled and the walls leaned in too close and the windows forgot how to open. But they were beautiful. Because they still stood. They had scars, but they had survived. That week, I wrote my own quote in the front of my journal. Forgiveness is a renovation, slow, messy, and deeply architectural, but if you build it right, it holds. By July, the business had grown. Claire took on her first solo design pitch. We hired a new site manager. I rebranded our company mission statement, not a full rewrite, just a subtle shift. We don't just restore homes, we recover storylines. It was the first sentence in our new client packet. And I meant every word. Because that's what I'd done. I had recovered mine. That fall, I sent Macy a letter. No envelope, no note, just a photo of the baby room we'd built for a single mom in Pineville. White walls, soft gray trim, a mobile made from hand-cut wood leaves and brass stars. In the center of the image, a framed print that read, "She will rise." I didn't expect a reply. But 2 weeks later, I received a small box. Inside, a broken piece of molding, gently sanded down, polished, and glued back together. On the bottom, scribbled in faded Sharpie, "Don't forget to breathe." That night, I mounted it above my desk, right where the light hits during golden hour. A reminder that even the broken parts, the ones splintered, buried, nearly discarded, still have a place in the frame. If you choose to honor them. Because legacy isn't just what you pass on. It's what you forgive yourself for keeping.